Hey there everybody, Eric from Outer Limitless coming at you today with another video. Now today's one of those beautiful fall days that you look forward to, but unfortunately it's not one of those crisp mornings that you like. It's like 70 plus degrees and humid. So not the normal fall day, but absolutely beautiful out here nonetheless. And so I thought I'd take the time to shoot some reviews here. And in today's video, we're going to take a look at this Safari Large Tarp from Aqua Quest. Now before I make it too far, I'd like to say thank you very much to a couple of people. First, Tim from the Tactical Defender, who has sent this tarp to me. He had a couple of them and sent one along to me so I could do a review as well. So thank you very much, Tim. I very much appreciate this. And second, the people from Aqua Quest. Thank you again for providing these tarps for review. I know you sent these along to Tim, and he sent them along to me, but I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you providing products for these channels to review and take a look at, and thank you for allowing me to get my hands on one of these here today. So anyway, with that said, today's video is going to be pretty much like a feature review. I'm going to talk about all the different components that make up this tarp to see if it's something that would work for you. Now in this review, I'm not going to cover so much how I have set this up. If you're interested in how I set it up, take a look at one of my prior videos, how I prepare a tarp for field use, and it covers this Safari Large Tarp from Aqua Quest specifically. So if you're interested in how I've set this up, please take a look, and there will be a link for it in the description box below. So as we get into the details here, I just wanted to take a look at some of the specifications. This particular tarp that we have here today is 9 feet 7 inches by 12 feet 9 inches. That is in its fully stretched out dimensions. This has a total weight of 2.4 pounds. Its package size at 12 inches by 6 inches by 3 inches, and has 19 total webbing loops. Now I'm always curious about if the sizes and weights that companies report are accurate. So if we look here, it says that the total pack size is 12 inches by 6 inches by 3 inches. So let's take some measurements here and see how that lays out. Well, first and foremost, the by 3 inches thing, I don't really know if I completely understand that, because at this point it's basically packed into a circle. And if we look here, it's only about 5 inches in diameter. So I think what they're saying is if this was packed up into more like a square and kind of more in this general shape, you know, if you look here, it's getting closer to that 3-inch dimension, and here closer to that 6-inch dimension. So I think the reported dimensions are probably not as it's nice and neat and in this sort of rounded out stuff sack, but more if this was folded into rectangles. Now it also reports that there's a 12-inch length. Obviously here this is packed down to basically 10.5 inches, so it is certainly not a full 12 inches. So, you know, the reported dimensions on the packed size is just a little bit different than what I'm seeing here, but again, I think that's because this is nice and round and not necessarily packed into a sort of a flat rectangle. Now getting a little bit further into this does also report that the weight is 2.4 pounds. Now I'm not sure if that's including this little stuff sack or if it's just the tarp itself, but let's get this scale here fired up and we'll take a quick look and see how this reads. So getting this on here, this weighs in at 2 pounds 1 ounce. 1 ounce out of 16 is 0.0625. So I see this tarp weighing in at roughly 2.06 pounds, which is certainly less than the 2.4 pounds that they're reporting. So in that regard, I mean, signs are looking good that this is really not terribly heavy. I mean, just call it basically 2 pounds. You know, I can slide this out of here, and let's see what the actual tarp itself weighs without the sort of packaging. And 2.05, so losing even a little bit more. So I mean, in essence, call this thing weighing in roughly about 2 pounds. Now the tarp I have here is the 13 by 10 foot model. This is made of 70D nylon. It is coated with a dual silicone and polyurethane coating, has reinforced stitching, heat tape seams, 19 reinforced webbing loops, and comes with a stuff sack. Now this tarp is considered to be 100% waterproof. As you can see here, I basically have it laid out completely in the horizontal position. I just kind of wanted to be able to walk under it and show you all the details here. But as I mentioned, you know, a lot of nice details. This is the 70 denier nylon. It's a ripstop material. You can see the pattern underneath there. And then these heat tape seams. Overall, a very nice quality tarp. This is a little bit heavier quality and durability than what I usually carry. A lot of times for my backpacking or camping application, you know, I tend to like a 10 by 10 tarp myself, so this one's a little larger, a little bit heavier, and a little bit thicker. So I'm not sure if you would use this specifically for backpacking or, you know, in a hiking situation where you're going a long distance, but you certainly could, and especially if you wanted a little bit of a larger or more durable tarp. But for me today, where I just, you know, came a reasonably small distance, I didn't go too far out here. It's kind of, I don't know, maybe I'd call it a day trip, you know, a little sort of afternoon of hanging out or a morning of hanging out, and you just wanted to have a tarp to keep you dry. This is absolutely a perfect option for that. So in that regard, that's kind of why I opted to bring this with me today. I thought it would be a nice quality tarp and a good size. Now, it isn't raining right now, but it's expected that there may be just a little bit of moisture today. So if it was to rain, this would allow me to obviously stay dry, continue doing my reviews out here, and so that's why I wanted a little more coverage and brought the 10 by 13 tarp. Now there's some little details. I'm on the underside of the tarp here, and you can see the Aqua Quest logo, and then they got this little tag here. So just little details you can see here. This is the large tarp, and these reinforced corners on the tie outs. Overall, nice stitching over this entire tarp. They do a really nice job with the finishing, and so it's a high quality product. There's no loose ends and no fraying as far as what I can see, so very well put together overall in my initial inspection. Now the tarp I have is the color olive. There is also a camo color. I tend to kind of like the solid colors, and I very much enjoy a subdued color to kind of blend in with my surroundings. So this olive color here is beautiful. It's a nice color green. It's kind of like I'd say a middle shade to everything else that you see around. You know, it's not the highlight and it's not the shadow. It's kind of right in the middle. So a very nice overall color that very much blends in with the surroundings. And just as I had mentioned, you can see the tarp there. Pretty minimal in terms of visibility. And I think if you really were kind of glancing by, you really might not notice that at all. So as you can see here, I have some pretty considerable tension on this tarp, and so having these reinforced tie outs is definitely a must. You can see the stitching across the top and that nice stitching on these edges, and even though that tie out is getting pulled nice and firm, because it comes from two directions, it's not really stressing the middle of the tarp here. Rather, it's kind of distributing it through this entire triangle area. So overall, that's very nice. And again, looking under at this reinforced area, you'll see here that even these seams are taped. And I mean, this is all the way down at the end of the tarp where that tape means just a little less. I mean, at this point you got water that could potentially be just wicking off the corners anyway, but they even went as far as to tape all these little seams. So nice attention to detail. Now obviously the corner tie outs are generally the most important, but there are also 3 additional tie-outs along each length on the short side, and there are 3 additional tie-outs on the long side. Now obviously the center one here is allowing you to make up your ridge line, and you can see there the loops across the middle. So not just the ones on the end here, but you also have 3 across that ridge line. Now there's kind of a lot going on in this center tie out here. So where I have this ridge line nice and taut, you can see the tension on that tie out there. It's very, very tight. I mean, this tarp really won't even budge. I have it very, very tight, but everything looks good and sound and true, and nothing's really pulling or stressing. So that's a good thing. Now you see this entire area is very well reinforced. Nice stitching and all your heat tape going over each and every one of these seams. And then you also have these loops here, which is kind of a nice little accessory loop. Now there's one on both sides. You also have one over here on the other end of the tarp, and that would work out very well for me. A lot of times what I do is I have a little clothesline that I like to set up, and I have little carabiners on each end of the clothesline that I could clip on and run it across. And that way at the end of a trip, if I was wet or I had anything I wanted to dry out, I could actually get it underneath the tarp to do that. So that is a pretty cool feature. I like that a lot, and it's actually tied in the proper direction. So if you can see, if I was to tie something to this, it would basically be pulling in that direction. If this was looped the other way, it would create stress. So anyway, the way that is set up is quite nice. So giving me the ability really to put like a clothesline or an accessory line to hang things up. Pretty sweet. Now you might notice that down this center ridgeline area where these panels of fabric meet, they are heavily reinforced. There's a nice heavy nylon reinforcement across the top going this way. But going the other direction, not quite so much. I mean, you do have some nice double stitching here going between these panels to hold them together, but you don't necessarily have that real heavy stitching and that heavy nylon reinforcing. So what I think is, in general, you know, this is obviously the optimum setup. I would say if you were to put this in some diamond formation, you'd be kind of stressing these fabrics and these different seams differently. So my suggestion would be, for the longevity of the tarp, to continue to run it basically the long way and in a square or rectangle pattern, not really like a diamond. And I mean, obviously the 10 by 13 dimensions aren't totally conducive to a diamond. I suppose you could if you wanted, but just to keep the stresses on the fabric appropriately on these seams, this is your optimum setup. And just taking a look at all that stitching, just well done, perfectly placed. No qualms to be had. Now, a subtle detail that I'd like to cover is just the amount of loop you have here. I don't necessarily like to have this much space between the ridgeline and the tarp. I tend to like to have my ridgelines a lot tighter. So basically saying, keeping the ridgeline really tight up against sort of that central ridge of the tarp. So one thing that you can do is put some stitches down lower here, and then running that ridge line down lower, tighter to the tarp, kind of helps with it moving around a little bit less. I mean, if you look at how much this allows the tarp to move and sway in the breeze, you know, you can tighten up on that if you want. So maybe just a suggestion to Aqua Quest, if it doesn't really add too much in the way of labor or money, just putting a second set of stitching down here so that users have the option to either run the ridgeline up high or down low. That would just be a nice little additional feature. Now, another additional feature that I think would have worked out pretty well for this tarp, especially where it's on the larger side, is maybe having some tie-outs on the side of the tarp here to allow you to kind of pull it out or bump it out. I mean, I find for me that a little extra room, especially if I use this with a hammock, is helpful. And just to have the versatility that comes with the ability to kind of pull this thing and bump it out. Now, obviously, at the same time, that comes with a little bit of a downfall where you'd have sort of some stitching penetration under here, and you'd also have to heat tape and seam seal this, but maybe not a problem. I mean, if you look at the work they've done on the rest of this, it is so totally sound, and I don't ever see having a problem with it. So if they addressed it the exact same way, I could not see that being a problem. So just a suggestion. It's not really a necessary thing. It's just another one of those little additional bonuses that help to kind of, set this thing apart and give it some additional functionality. Now, something else that's really important and worth mentioning, these Aqua Quest tarps do come with a 2-year no worries warranty. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, obviously Aqua Quest stands by their product. They're proud of what they make, and they do a great job, so you should have no problems with this. And if you do, you're covered for at least 2 years. So that's very good, and great job, Aqua Quest. So all right, guys, there you have it. A real quick look at the features of the Aqua Quest Safari Large Tarp. Now again, not necessarily the lightest tarp, but definitely a high quality, durable, and capable tarp. Has a nice overall dimensions if you get the large tarp, and in this case it's a 10 by 13, which has a great surface area, is totally suitable for a camping day trip, maybe even backpacking application. Personally, myself, like I said, I typically like a 10 by 10 tarp, but I can see where I'm going to use this. I do have a couple of shelter systems that need just a little more coverage and the ability for me to necessarily have to stay dry and also keep my gear dry, so having a little more surface area will work. Now, in the backpacking situation, personally myself, I don't mind carrying a little bit of extra weight to have something that's quality and provides the overall purpose that I need. So even though this isn't necessarily your lightest option, definitely durable, definitely quality, and will do a great job for its given needs. So all right, guys, thanks for stopping by. I hope you like what you saw. I hope you found it a little bit informative. If you like what you saw, please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Take care now. I'll see you soon. Now, if you watched my prior video on how I set up a tarp, I've given you some tips and tricks. Now, this is an additional tip for you. This is one that I've learned from Mike at MCQ Bushcraft, and if you have not seen that channel, I highly recommend going back to some of his older stuff. Very informative. His older videos, I mean, his new videos are great, but his older videos are incredibly informative, and I've learned a ton of stuff from him. And this is how you wrap paracord when you're done with it. So here is my tie out. Basically what you do is you pinch it between your thumb and the side of your hand, and you start a figure 8 process going like this. Now you'll notice the first loop kind of grabbed onto this end of the cord, which allows me to continue to wrap this thing in my figure 8. And this works very well for cleaning up your paracord at the end of an excursion, at the end of a trip. Keeps it nice and bundled, and then when you go to deploy it in the future, it doesn't get all messed up. So anyway, just a real quick and easy tip and trick. And then for me to wrap this up and finalize it, pull it off my hands, and then just start to wrap it like this all the way around up to the top until I get to the end of the line, and I'll just pinch it here on that figure 9, and it'll stay nice and taut and tight up against my tarp. So the very end of this, as I mentioned, just going to continue to wrap this thing all the way up, being sure to keep it nice and tight. And then I take that figure 9 and I loop it around and I just pinch it, and that thing is going nowhere.